Spoiler warning. The following discussion will contain spoilers. We recommend checking out the movie first, then coming back to hang with us. But if you don't care about that, glad to have you here.
I warned you, Brad!
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Real Review. My name's Kevin.
And I'm John.
And we are your real movie guys. It's December, so you know what that means. Real Christmas. Real Christmas is the special celebration of all your favorite holiday classic films. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at Gremlins. A young man inadvertently breaks 3 important rules concerning his new pet and unleashes a horde of malevolently mischievous monsters onto a small town. John, Gremlins is one of my favorite childhood films, which is kind of concerning considering how dark this movie really is upon my rewatch, but I just love Gremlins. This movie was huge for us in our childhood.
Yeah, definitely. One of those movies that you would always see around this time, too. It would always pop up on TV.
I don't know if Gremlins gets enough appreciation as it should. Maybe it does. I mean, it's merchandise to hell at this point. Even now, we still see Gremlins merchandise constantly popping up. I think this movie holds strong, and to this day, even when I go back to watch this movie, the effects still really work. A lot of that has to do with everything you see in this movie is here. These gremlins are physically here. We talk over and over again on this channel, especially me. I can't shut up about it. Practicality is so damn important to making your film stand that test of time. Yeah, you can see the latex a little bit. You can see the clipping. You know, you can tell they look like puppets, right? Or animatronics. You can tell, but they're there. And that makes all the more difference in these scenes having that effect that they have.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also amazing, too, how these puppets hold up so well nowadays, too. Even watching it now in the best definition, they still really actually look good.
Yeah, I mean, I watched this in 4K. The 4K restoration leaves a little bit to be desired to some extent. But overall, the puppets look really good. You can see where they wet the puppets to make them have like a slimy, gross effect. Their eyes, their movements. Again, they look like puppets. They're still effective. One report that I could tell, it looks like the puppets, they said, are estimated between $30,000 to $40,000 a puppet. That's a lot of money. And I know they said the Gizmo one was probably one of the most difficult ones to work with because he was so small. There are 3 rules, John. What are the 3 rules of Gremlins?
Can't feed them after midnight. They cannot get sunlight, and they cannot get wet.
Very true. And those 3 rules, I think, stand with just every kid. You know, once you watch this movie, you can never forget it. There's one I want to talk about a little bit later, but the one rule that's in here is they can't be exposed to bright light. And that was partially made because of the puppets. They wanted to hide the fact they were puppets because a lot of the times you can see, like, if there's bright light on there, you're going to see the seam lines. You're going to see animatronics doing their thing a little bit. It's not going to be as easy to hide. So one clever way was to say, well, you know, they can't be in bright light, so we got to try and hide these guys. That works out extremely well. A lot of these scenes are really dark and they hide it convincingly, especially with Gizmo. He's usually sitting down. You don't really see him standing too often.
The areas that they put these creatures in, you can tell that they're puppets, but they're put in a spot where they're very well designed. Like, it's almost like they're covering it. Like, even when he's holding the gremlin, like, you can tell that it's like not a live thing, but it's just right, our perfect spot.
Yeah, he has it just in the right spot where it's a puppet, but it might not be a puppet. You can't really tell. They do really good with the cinematography to hide that. I mean, sure, they probably hollowed out the floor, I think, for a lot of the gremlin scenes, especially when we talk about the bar scene in this movie, which is like one of the classic scenes everyone usually refers to, with the gremlins hijack a bar and start going crazy. It doesn't hurt anything, and the bar actually hides the gremlins even more because they're behind a bar. There's obstacles you can put in front of them to make it look convincingly. One thing they did try to do, which I don't know if a lot of people know, I certainly didn't know this until I started looking a little bit further into the film, is at one point they actually did consider trying to put spider monkeys in costumes to try and make them be gremlins. They brought them on set and they tried one, but the monkey was so terrified, started freaking out, going crazy. They're like, all right, animatronics, we're not dealing with that. We can't handle that. That'd be too insane. I think this was the right choice. So what makes this film timeless? I think in general, it's fun and inventive. I'd like to equate this to, it's a kid's film for grown-ups. It's not really a child's film. It's like for that kid that grows up and watches that movie. It's
I agree with that.
Adults. I look back and I wonder to myself, why was I able to watch this movie? There's a lot of adult stuff, as far as the violence and what they're suggesting, things of that nature. Not to say that everyone should be censored,
It tells a lot about your childhood.
Yeah, right. It sure does. It's interesting to know, too, that this movie's rated PG. Now, the only reason it's rated PG is because there is no PG-13 rating in 1984 at this time. They didn't create that rating yet. The MPAA actually said, well, it's not really rated R. It's not super violent enough to be an R-rated movie, but it's nothing in between, so we're going to make it PG. And later on in that same year, actually, Temple of Doom comes out, Indiana Jones, and that actually sparks the creation of the PG-13 rating for that very reason. The movie really is a kid's film for adults, and a lot of that has to do with Joe Dante. Now, Joe Dante, we've talked about on this channel before, the director. He did the classic Piranha, which we talked about. Another one of my personal favorites that he did was Small Soldiers. Feel how you feel about that movie. We love Small Soldiers on this channel. You can see the influence there, I think, too. You can actually see like a little bit of like, oh, so Small Soldiers is Toy Story and Gremlins combined. Yeah, you wouldn't be wrong in saying that. But yeah, Joe Dante, you could tell he has a love of this kind of style, that dark humor. There's so much dark humor in this movie. I would call this a comedy horror classic. A lot of the horror, it's funny. It's mean-spirited, sure, but it's funny. I always find myself laughing like older woman when she gets ejected from her railing chair, flies out the window. I think that's hysterical. I know it's dark and I know it's mean, but it's okay because to get away with, I think, the dark aspect of it, it's always very cartoony. Everything's over the top in this movie, especially the Gremlins. We talk about that bar scene. Everything's over the top. They have props. Like, where'd they get props from? Like, why do they have like a prop gun and like weird like little clothes that just fit them? It's just very cartoony in nature. And I think that's okay. It kind of works out in its favor because it plays off everything else being so dark and drab in this film. So, John, the big question I have to ask you is Gremlins a Christmas film?
Well, depending on your definition of a Christmas film, I would say this is a Christmas film. Because every single time that we talk about a Christmas film, I feel like there's some major things that you need to have for they considered a Christmas film. A Christmas tree, this has. Christmas lights, this has. Christmas present, this has. So this is considered a Christmas movie.
But does it have the Christmas spirit?
I think Gizmo's a very good Christmas spirit.
He's a very good Christmas spirit. Yeah, the spirit of giving, right? His father gives him a Mogwai. Right. And it's funny, I think, the jury's out on this. Keep in mind, this film is written by Chris Columbus, who we're no stranger to this channel. We talked about Home Alone, Christmas Chronicles 1 and 2. It's his trademark. It lives and breathes Christmas. I think Christmas is really part of this movie. Whether or not it's directly a Christmas film is up to you. I always watch this around the holidays, and I think the small town setting creates a really fun atmosphere for the events to take place in, especially when you drape Christmas over it. It's just that more exciting to me. You have the Gremlins causing havoc in such a small area where it's conceivable versus maybe like a giant city setting. Shrinking the scale definitely helps. It makes the interactions that much more fun. So what makes this a Christmas film for me is the Christmas speech. It's one of the most darkly messed up things in a movie I have ever heard. The premise of the speech essentially is Kate, played by Phoebe Cates, recounts the story of her father dressing up as Santa Claus, trying to come down the chimney. He gets stuck in the chimney and then dies of asphyxiation, and that's why she hates the holidays and everything like that. It's so darkly messed up. It just sticks with you for a really long time. And it's funny because that became maybe even more so than the Gremlins. That's one of the most famous things that came out of this movie. The funny part is that was almost not in this movie. A lot of people like to think Steven Spielberg directed this movie. He didn't. It's one of those like classic misconceptions. Steven Spielberg actually said he wanted that scene removed because he thought it was too dark, but Joe Dante fought for it and they ended up keeping it in the film. So he didn't want to mess with his vision too much at the end of the day. So Spielberg's like, all right, keep it in. And thank God they did. That scene really sticks with you. Whatever you want to say about it, I think that encompasses the whole darkly comedic thing because it's funny. It's so awkward. I love it. That captures the spirit of this movie.
Yeah, you can see Santa Claus getting stuck in the chimney, dying in the chimney. Like, it's almost like you can see that happening.
Right. No, it's not so far-fetched, and it's kind of within that darkly comedic spirit of the holiday they're going for here. Which brings me to all the other characters. Most of the characters are fine in this movie. The weakest actor, which is unfortunate for me, is Zach Galligan as Billy. Even as a kid, I never really liked him. He's just pretty bland and uninteresting. Even when he has Gizmo, he's just kind of boring. I just never found anything he did interesting in this film.
He's a character. You kind of like replace almost.
Yeah,
he's just
interchangeable.
like, he's nothing to write home about.
The delivery's bland. Maybe he needed a little more direction with some of his lines to show a little more enthusiasm. I think he was trying to some extent. I just don't know if his skills up to that point. He's just a bland actor. Nothing special, which is a shame because you have such a crazy, over-the-top premise that's interesting and fun, but your main actor just doesn't really draw me into it. It's really Gizmo and the Gremlins. It's not any of the human characters, which is a shame because I think there was a missed opportunity for something there with that. Also, I think some of the logic leaves a little bit to be desired. I hate doing this with movies sometimes because it's not about the logic. When you go to see a movie, you go into it saying, I'm watching this movie, whatever they tell me, I have to believe. That's the lore of the story. But it does creep on you at times. The big one for me has always been, and I've always questioned, with the 3 rules, is how do you know when it's after midnight? How do you know? You could be in a different time zone and midnight's different. There's no universal timestamp for when after midnight is to feed the Gremlins. And people will argue maybe it could change on time zone when you change places and Gizmo's there, and that makes no sense. Not that a creature that changes into a gremlin and multiplies and stuff makes much sense. But at the same time, it's always bothered me. Just even as a little kid, like, how do they know it's after midnight? If he's in China in one day and then the other day he's back in America, like, how does he know the difference?
Well, also, when do you feed him? Does it go from like midnight to 6 a.m.?
Yeah. Again,
Midnight to 7?
Yeah.
I mean,
so if I feed him after midnight, when's a good time? How am I going to know? It's so silly, and it's such a nitpick, really, with this movie. And I'm not trying to do that. It's fine. It is what it is. It's more of like a fun observation on my part. Just as a kid, it always bothered me. And as an adult, I get it. I think we're at that point where we can give our final scores. I'm going to give Gremlins an A. Gremlins is fantastic, man. It still holds up to me. Those Gremlins are creepy and dark. Like, if you told me today that you're afraid of Gremlins, I kind of get why. If you were a little kid and watched this movie, they still kind of have a little bit of creepiness to them, and they work. They're physically there, which is always a plus. I think everything hits darkly, comedically that it's going for. Gremlins is a fun time. It's a great holiday classic. You're going to see it on my TV every Christmas season. I can't say I'd recommend it enough. John, where do you stand with this film?
I give this film a solid B+. I feel like it's one of those movies that you can continuously watch every Christmas or around Christmas time, or really anytime, but it just seems like most of the time when you think about Gremlins, it's around Christmas time. And I just feel like the movie's got so much good, and it also shows how good some films can age and how some other ones don't. And this one ages pretty well.
Gremlins is great. It ages great. It's dark, it's funny, it has the spirit of Christmas. I think Gremlins encompasses everything you could want out of a movie, plus a little bit more if you're into that darkly comedic stuff. Real Christmas continues on as we celebrate the holiday season. We'll catch you next time.
See ya!
If you guys like what you've seen here today, consider giving this video a like and leaving your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stay up to date with everything Real Movie Guys related, make sure to hit that subscribe button and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And don't forget, all you audio listeners at home, we are available on many podcasting platforms. Just search The Real Movie Guys, you should pop right up. Thank you again all so much for joining us on this episode of The Real Review. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. Catch you next time.